The big guy, the man everyone called a Goldberg ripoff, Ryback. His time in the limelight was lengthy and provided a few examples of the term striking while the iron's hot. Ryan Reeves started off his wrestling career as a member of Tough Enough. He grew up enjoying wrestling and saw it as a passion to follow alongside exercising. Working out was an important part of his youth and easily allowed him to stand out in that season of Tough Enough. Ryan Reeves had personality. This man was so obsessed with food and was generally a goofy guy. While he didn't win Tough Enough, his future was bright. He signed with the WWE and was sent to Ohio Valley Wrestling and eventually Florida Championship Wrestling. It wouldn't be until 2010 that WWE fans would be reintroduced to Ryan Reeves. This time around, he went by the name of Skip Sheffield. Bro was just a wannabe Jimmy Wang Gang. Okay, it was. I'm just joking. NXT Season 1 was his home. He was mentored by William Regal and was simply a guy that wanted to have fun. It was a random combination that I assume was used to bring out the best in Sheffield. He wasn't treated as a huge threat and had this goofy quote, yup, what it do? Why? I don't know. It was a strange change compared to his original FCW character, which I'll get into later. Sheffield had potential already because of his look and intensity. He was a powerhouse in a time WWE lacked that type of talent. There was guys like Sheamus and Mark Henry, but it was a real noticeable hole that Skip Sheffield could have filled in. After NXT Season 1 concluded, the rookies were brought in as a new faction trying to take over the WWE, the Nexus. Their debut was one of the most historic. It was a huge statement and showed that WWE was actually doing something fresh for once. WWE after WrestleMania 26 wasn't really creatively exciting, and coupled with the departures of Shawn Michaels, Batista, Triple H, and The Undertaker, who went away for a couple of months, it was a shot in the arm. The Nexus dominated the entire summer and provided a very entertaining story. It was unlike anything WWE did in the last couple of years. Skip Sheffield was featured in marquee matches and it looked like things were getting better, but then he suffered an injury which left him sidelined for a long time. He hurt his ankle during a tag team match at a live event on August 18th, and this injury in itself would change the complexion of his entire career. You see, the Nexus was strong and almost indestructible, but the moment John Cena beat them at SummerSlam, that all changed. They slowly fell apart, and as unfortunate as the injury was for Skip Sheffield, a lot of the guys in the group would have it worse. We'll never know how things would have went for him if that injury never happened. The big guy was away from the squared circle for nearly a year and a half, undergoing surgery 3 times. It was a rough recovery, but by the end of 2011, he was ready to go. But as expected, he needed to carve his own path. He can't go with the Nexus story, which was over by this time period. Enter Ryback. Ryback was basically a one-man wrecking crew who didn't show much emotion. This character was altered from his original in FCW, which was based on the Terminator. It was kinda cool. He was from the future, had zero emotion, and was basically a robot. It wasn't entirely the same here. On the April 6, 2012 episode of SmackDown, some random jobber grabbed the mic and was talking like he belonged here. All of a sudden, Ryback interrupted. A bunch of wrestlers watched in the back as Ryback showed what he was capable of in his debut match. An impressive outing for the big guy. Funny enough, fans in general saw things different. All I need to say is this: there's a jobber in the middle of the ring, his opponent is full of energy, not to mention is large and bald. Also, the singlet look reminded a lot of people of RVD. Soon enough, Ryback was starting to face more notable talents such as Heath Slater and Tyler Rex. He was slowly climbing the card and showing that he was capable of dropping them as well. At the time, WWE had a couple of big guys that never worked, like Mason Ryan and Ezekiel Jackson. With Ryback, it was different. They took the Goldberg formula, and compared to the other guys at the time, he was the best choice. This man had a certain look of determination and charisma about him that was a bit different. Yes, he was basically a budget Goldberg, but I would be lying if I said I didn't like Ryback in 2012, and that in itself would continue to escalate throughout the year. The opponents were starting to get a bit tougher. Jinder Mahal for some reason was hell-bent on taking him out but failed badly. Ryback followed up by demolishing The Miz, and his momentum was about to go to overdrive. With John Cena suffering an elbow injury, this opened way for Ryback to take his spot at Hell in a Cell. This man didn't climb up the card, he just flew, and his rise was meteoric because there wasn't even a mid-card run in there. Man even had John Cena shilling for him in storyline. It was a crazy turnaround going from Jinder Mahal to CM Punk in a month because the only mid-card type of wrestler he faced was The Miz. It was a very strange situation WWE found themselves in. They clearly underestimated Ryback's popularity. This man was on fire at this point, and a title match would mean two things: either he's champion or his momentum's ruined. Now, I'm not going to try and over-exaggerate things. His momentum wouldn't entirely get ruined. It would take a hit. What's strange is that it was looking like Ryback was going to challenge for the IC title at the time. The biggest problem was CM Punk's title reign. It was almost at a year, and ending it on a B pay-per-view didn't seem right. But at the same time, Ryback losing his first match was going to be rough. And this decision, in some ways, changed the complexion of his career. I think a lot would be different. Instead, it was the start of his character being a choker. Brad Maddox, the referee, cost him the match in a widespread conspiracy which involved multiple people. He did look strong afterwards, but this was the beginning of the end, strangely. Then when he got another opportunity, the Shield were there. They always caused him trouble in moments when he looked good. If there was an ounce of positivity with Ryback, the Shield were there to cause misery. They faced him in Team Hell No at TLC, and it's one of the greatest TLC matches of all time, and for the pay-per-view itself, probably the greatest match ever. Like, off the top of my head, TLC, the pay-per-view, probably didn't have a match better than this one. Very few debuts go as hard as this one. For the Shield, I don't think there's many debuts that could top this TLC match. Ryback was a strong favorite for the Royal Rumble and storyline. His performance followed up, and in many ways, this could have been another opportunity to reignite his momentum because he almost never looked good feuding with the Shield. I think his moment was right here, but it was going to be John Cena's night. Ryback could have faced Big Show for the world title, hell, maybe even Mark Henry. Instead, he came very close, losing to John Cena. Following this, he went into a feud with Mark Henry for WrestleMania. Both men tested their strength, destroying jobbers. Henry was leaning a weight bar on the big guy, and on paper, it really looked like Ryback was destroying. Like one of those big WrestleMania moments from a rising star. Henry had made a huge name for himself already, but his stock increased with the Hall of Pain story. He took out everybody in sight and was the strongest booked wrestler in the entire WWE at a time where John Cena, Randy Orton, and CM Punk were the marquee stars. So Ryback beating him at WrestleMania would have been nice. That didn't happen though, and it was strange. He failed to hit the shell shock and Henry just landed on him to score the victory. That was enough, and he did look good afterwards after the match, but before making this video, I didn't even remember the shell shock afterwards. His time as a face was done because after these losses, the fact that he was always choking when it mattered most, like the 2000s Dallas Mavericks, barring 2006 of course, there was only one way to go. Ryback spoke about his dissatisfaction with the entire face front and also held resentment towards his match at WrestleMania 29. And I quote, "Before they booked me to lose 7 pay-per-views in a row, I was number 2 in merchandise in WWE. I was beating John Cena on certain nights. I had half the amount of merchandise that he had, but would beat him in shirts, chains, and photos on some nights and be right there with him the rest. From a business standpoint, if you see a guy who is red hot and the crowd is behind him, you should be going out of your way to make merchandise and book and protect this guy because you have lightning in a bottle. But that was not the case, and instead, they had to go out of their way to make me look bad. I'll never forget that day. My numbers kept climbing even though I was losing these big time matches. I was under the assumption that I was going over Mark Henry on WrestleMania and then turning heel the next night on John Cena, when I found days before that I was not going over, but that they wanted me to follow my face with my finish and look like an idiot. I said there was no way I was doing that. I asked, why are we doing this? I went to Vince and spoke with him for 30 minutes in Gorilla, the staging area right behind the curtain, and he lied to me how this was the reason for my heel turn, that I fell on my face and tripped. I just couldn't cut it, and that's why I turned heel. Ultimately though, they were just trying to run me into the ground and ruin my brand forever. And that happened time and time again. As you saw with that finish, it made zero sense from a booking standpoint to book me to fall flat on my face and then the next night to turn me heel. The reaction to my heel turn was louder than ever, and then what did Vince do? He came to me personally and said, "We're taking away all your merchandise. I want your merchandise to tank and no more Feed Me More," which was the thing that put me on the map. So instead of giving me an edge as a heel, you're stripping me of everything. Haven't seen it go over me, and then you saw how my career fell after that. I lost the momentum and I never got it back again. Ryback usually talks a lot about merchandise deals in interviews and actually puts in perspective what turning heel does to your earnings. I believe CM Punk made mention of it as well. He turned heel the night after WrestleMania 29, dropping John Cena and making his intentions clear, and this is after showing that he's the biggest bottler in the entire company. I gave him a 3-month feud with John Cena, which forced him to speak more and develop a different character, and he was more of a bully who at the same time felt very intelligent about himself. It kinda ruined him. The fact that they turned him heel with no real plan other than feuding with John Cena, it was bad. It was never gonna be him. It was never gonna work for Ryback to turn heel and lose to John Cena, because after that, it's tough to recover. He had a working thing, like I'm not gonna be like, oh, Ryback was my favorite wrestler or anything like that, but, and yes, he was limited, you know, like he wasn't my favorite wrestler or anything like that, but he had something at the time. He had something, and they didn't want to bring out the maximum potential of it because, well, they just didn't want to. It's simply what it comes down to. They didn't want to push him above a certain level, even though he was selling merch and whatnot. And it's funny because after WrestleMania, it had been about 6 months since he lost and some of his momentum was shot, yet fans were still cheering him, so it's kind of crazy. Every once in a while, this happens to wrestlers in WWE. They kind of tried it with Daniel Bryan later on, but it didn't work. With that said, he lost 2 matches in a row to John Cena and feuded with Chris Jericho for a bit. And he actually won this match, but it didn't mean much in the long run. The bully thing would continue to develop as Ryback started going after others. It gave him direction, it was solid, and the story led to him feuding with CM Punk and trying to take him out with the help of Curtis Axel and Paul Heyman. The feud in general is infamous for that table spot where Ryback completely missed, leading to Punk suffering a concussion and asking him if he's stupid or he's stupid. It's something along the lines of that. The big guy believes that Punk's comments towards him were very damaging. This feud was mostly based on Punk and Heyman's relationship with Ryback doing his dirty work. Punk came out on top by the end of it though, and the partnership between Heyman and Ryback was over. They went their separate ways, and Ryback was at his coldest since his debut in 2012. Nothing was hot about him. He was losing matches more often and was mostly in the background. Without making this video, off the top of my head, I don't remember him doing anything around late 2013, but this was around the time Rybaxel was formed. Both men were in a tough yet similar situation, shunned by Paul Heyman and overlooked by management. In Curtis Axel's case, his fall is almost sudden, because everyone remembers him winning the Intercontinental Championship. After that though, it's like his credibility faded. So these two are now a duo. Rybaxel were not that strong on the roster, and for some reason I think they would have done better in 2016. What's funny is every time I'm seeing something of theirs, they never have an entrance. There's not much to say about them. This partnership lasted for a year and I don't really have much to say about them. Otherwise I'd be yapping right now. They always pop up in the middle of the ring with no entrance. The commentary tries to sell them as a threat, but then they end up losing in 3 minutes. That's just literally how it was. Ryback throughout the year was wrestling with a strained groin and had to go away for surgery. This left them sidelined for about 2 months, from August to October, and also meant the end of Rybaxel because plans were in motion for the big guy to go back to what he knew best. Now, one thing I will say about Rybaxel, they have probably the greatest tag team split I've ever seen from a WWE tag team. These guys literally split in the back, all cool, no mean words, no attack, none of that. It was just a cool split. They're like, hey, we gotta go our separate ways, and it was a good moment. On the October 27th, 2014 episode of Raw, Ryback made his return as a babyface, and instantly you can feel that he was into it and proud to be back as a good guy. The intensity was there, the enthusiasm, and WWE saw potential for yet another Ryback push. And initially, it seemed like the big guy was the final member of Team Authority for Survivor Series. He fit the role, a mercenary who had no remorse or regrets over destroying others. However, he had other plans. This version of Ryback wasn't the same as his 2012 self. It was more of a mid-card face that put over others, but at the same time had his moments. They even gave him the Intercontinental Championship at Elimination Chamber. We don't really like to talk about the match. It was very disjointed. It's a very commendable performance from Dolph himself, but the match itself was very unfortunate. With that said, it was clear though that the main event scene was too stacked for Ryback, so it was a position better than most, but it wasn't a position that would lead to much more. He never had that fire as a babyface here. The only thing consistent wasn't his character role, but the fact that he was always near a title. He challenged for the US title, feuding with Kalisto around WrestleMania 32 time, but then he suddenly disappeared. His final match was on the Payback pre-show against Kalisto. After this, he was gone. I remember a lot was going on at the time, and him going away wasn't even noticeable. I'm not gonna lie and say, oh yeah, I remember Ryback leaving, because I don't. I do remember his release though in August of 2016. So what happened was WWE and Ryback had a contract dispute. They were ready to extend, but he didn't like their terms, and in addition, the way he was booked. His complaints ranged from pay to the way they refused to comment on others claiming he was an unsafe wrestler. Because every once in a while, somebody got injured, such as the time Ziggler faced Ryback in 2012, and a lot pointed at him and said he's green, he's unsafe. Another creative issue was, of course, his heel turn in 2013, but also the fact that they refused to go all the way with the bully character, instead pairing him with Paul Heyman as the guy to face CM Punk. Because if you watch that feud, Ryback was the hired gun and a background character. And while he did enjoy the Intercontinental Championship reign, he saw it as a negotiation tactic. Most importantly, it was the pay. He didn't like the fact that turning heel was going to make him less money, not to mention since wrestling was a certain way, if he falls down the card because of the booking, he makes less money. So Ryback had a lot of complaints, but the main one was pay, and I do get where he's coming from with the salary thing, because you don't choose where you're placed on the card. They could literally raise you up and give you more money. I kind of get that. Of course, there's drawing power, merchandise sale, all that kind of stuff. But I kind of get what he says in the fact that if you're our upper mid-card wrestler, they could literally turn you to a jobber and you make less money. I get that one. But to this very day, he still has problems with WWE. But if Ryback did remain in WWE, like if we think about it for a moment, would he have done much? I personally don't think it would have been more than a mid-carder. I think he could have been the opposite to Braun Strowman on SmackDown in 2016 if they could have pushed him, something like that. But I just can't imagine him doing much because the card was too stacked. So he probably would have been a tag team guy. So yeah. Alright, Ryback's push was a wild one. This guy was very, very popular. I'm not going to try and undersell it at all. I legitimately remember 2012, October of 2012. This guy was very big. He was literally the most popular babyface in the entire WWE at a time when Randy Orton and John Cena were around. Not a lot of people get to say that. He was very popular, and if they booked things differently, maybe he would have been around to this very day. Well, who knows? Other than that, they had some opportunities to reheat him up, the heel turn, which was kind of unnecessary, but at the same time, it also makes sense because he was losing often. His face turn 2014 was a bit nice, but it wasn't to the level of his 2012 run, and after that, he was just stuck as a mid-card. So yeah. Alright, what you guys think of Ryback? Please comment down below, and that's the first video. Make sure you hit the meat hook clothesline on the like button, and perhaps the shell shock on the subscribe button. Peace, I'm out.